Love for characters is a large factor in what drives us to love fictional pieces of work. We get attached to some of our favorite characters and what they do in the universe that's being built around them. However, the longer a story goes on, the more characters that need to be introduced. And as more characters are introduced, other characters kind of unfortunately have to take a step out of the limelight. However, sometimes it feels as though characters are introduced to be immediately sidelined, which is kind of the way that fiction has to work. We can't make every character that's introduced the main character. Some characters get a couple of pages, some characters get a couple of chapters, and some characters get a couple dozen of chapters. But at the end of the day, the more characters that are added, the less screen time some characters are gonna get. The more characters that are added, the less screen time the main character is gonna get. That's just the way that an ensemble cast works. But the unfortunate reality of having an ensemble cast is that some of us as readers get attached to individual characters who then get forgotten by the story. We grow attached to characters that the author very clearly is not that attached to. And therefore, we simply just get to squeal in excitement every couple of chapters when one of our favorite background characters appears. Now, these characters, by their very nature, aren't that popular. That's why they're not the mainstay of the manga we're reading or the anime we're watching. And thus, these characters become underrated. Characters who, in our eyes, deserve more screen time and more love and more fights, but just never seem to get it. And Naruto, a show that ran for 700 plus episodes, definitely has its fair share of underrated characters. And today, I want to share with you a list of characters from Naruto that I believe are drastically underrated. Like, downright deviously so. And explain to you why I believe these characters are underrated and why I believe they deserve more screen time and love. But before we get to ranking or explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you like the idea of me ranking and explaining things, you're gonna love my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk about all other anime. Just posted our first ever 7 Deadly Sins video over there, so that's something. And if you like listening to me talk about anime-based sins, then you're gonna love my podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So there are a lot of characters in Naruto. And therefore, the reality that some of the characters that I fell in love with were gonna get hit with a little sideline treatment was always probably gonna happen. And honestly, I'm not the only person affected by this. I know tons of people whose favorite characters barely show up in the story at all. But just because a character doesn't show up in the story that much does not mean they are underrated. Shizune is one of the most beloved characters in all of Naruto, and he's in the story for less than 1% of its total run. The same could be said about Itachi. Even though he's in substantially more than Shizune, he is still one of the most beloved characters in all of Naruto, even though he's barely in it. So today, we're not talking about screen time or important fights or really anything like that. Today, we're gonna be talking about, and specifically ranking, characters with a large disparity between the amount of love I believe they have and the amount of love I believe they should have. Which means as we work our way up from 10 to 1, there's 10 characters, the disparity between the amount of love they have and they should have will get larger as we go on. Meaning our number 10 spot is underrated, but not super underrated, while our number 1 spot is massively underrated. And that's basically it. Now that you understand the rules, let's get into the list. Because coming in at number 10 in our last place spot is Sakura. And while it pains me to put Sakura in last place in anything when I'm making a list, it's actually kind of a good thing for her. See, there are tons of you that would argue that Sakura doesn't even belong on this list, and that's actually why she's in last place. Sakura recently came close to winning Naruto Top 99, placing in the top 3 out of all of the Naruto characters in the world. And while some people, children, speculated that other anime fandoms were voting up Sakura so that the Naruto fandom would have to read a manga about Sakura, that absolutely wasn't happening, mind you. The very fact that that idea was circling around the anime community proves the point that Sakura still is somehow underrated. See, Sakura is confirmed to be South America's favorite Naruto character and garnered enough votes worldwide that the 2 people that podiumed with her out of all Naruto characters were Itachi and Minato, and yet the most pervasive talking point that came out of Sakura placing top 3 is that somehow other anime fandoms were trying to sabotage the Naruto fandom. Like liking some anime makes you a militarized member of a group trying to tear down the other groups. The reason that Sakura comes in at number 10 on this list is because she is widely beloved. She gets a lot of love, but she also probably garners the most hate out of anybody in the Naruto universe. More so than bad guys who actively made it their entire lives to make Naruto miserable. Now, obviously, this hate all rides on the back of actions that Sakura did as a child, like bullying Naruto for not having parents to another orphan in Sasuke, being generally useless in the Forest of Death, having the world's worst fight with Ino in the Chunin exams, and so on and so forth. Some would argue that Sakura's shenanigans actually even continued into Shippuden, with moments like her confessing her fake feelings for Naruto or failing to kill Sasuke at the bridge. And a lot of people still hold onto all of these talking points, talking about how Sakura's the pink trash can. But what more cultured weebs have begun to realize is that Sakura doesn't deserve half of the hate she gets. Obviously, as a child, she was annoying and useless, yes. But she was also placed on a team with Indra and Ashura's reincarnations being led by probably the strongest Jonin at the village at that current time. She is the child of a flower shop owner who got placed on a team with 2 reincarnations of gods. Yeah, she doesn't shine nearly as brightly as Naruto or Sasuke or even Kakashi, but that's because coming out of the Shinobi Academy, all that she had was Shinobi Academy training. And you know what Sakura did do? During the time skip, she picked herself up by her bootstraps after Kakashi, mind you, completely failed her. Kakashi realized that Sakura had probably the best chakra control he's ever seen in a genin and was like, wow, she'd be good at genjutsu, and then never taught her any. Didn't send her to Kurenai, didn't try himself, just was like, I'm gonna go deal with Sasuke, who he lost. So what did Sakura do? She went out and found somebody who would actually train her, and she mastered medical ninjutsu. She found a true application to her chakra control. She mastered a technique that Tsunade is the only other person we've ever seen use, the strength of 100 seal. And for a while during the war arc, before Hagoromo decided to send down from the sky and give Naruto and Sasuke hacks for nothing, was relative to Naruto and Sasuke in terms of power in the beginning of the war arc. But even after Ninja Sky Daddy decided to descend down from whatever dimension he lives in, infinitely siphoning energy from the Pure Lands, and give Naruto and Sasuke hacks for nothing, Sakura still fought side by side with them and went into a battle against Kaguya where she was the only person who wasn't in Otsutsuki or using Sage of Six Paths chakra. And she helped. She sucker punched Kaguya on the back of hard work in hard work alone. But a lot of people know this, and that's why Sakura has become a more beloved character in the latter years of Naruto fandom. In fact, whether or not you enjoy Sakura as a character is how I deem whether or not you're worthy to talk to about anything Naruto. Because until you can identify her character development and what she went through and how she was able to accomplish it, I don't care about your opinions. But a lot of people know this, and therefore Sakura has been getting her flowers recently, no pun intended, which is why she's coming in last place here. But enough about Sakura, I can feel my blood pressure rising. Let's move to our number 9 spot, Ibiki. Or for those of you who don't know the names of every single character in Naruto, the torture guy, as that's pretty much all Ibiki is known for. See, Ibiki is something known as a Tokubetsu Jonin, or in English, a special Jonin. Now, a special Jonin isn't a higher rank than a Jonin. That's a misconception. A special Jonin is somebody who may not necessarily have all the skills to be considered a Jonin across the board, however, is so singularly skilled at one thing that they set themselves apart from the rest of the Chunin, and therefore should be considered a Jonin, kind of like a warrant officer in real-life military. And what made Ibiki a special Jonin is the fact that he has a complete understanding of the human mind, which makes him really good at interrogation and torture, which is why he's probably the head of Konoha's torture and interrogation force. Yes, Konoha has a torture division. So why am I placing the torture guy on the list of underrated characters? Well, one, his character design was always sick. The second we saw him in the Chunin exams, I was like, oh, that guy's a badass. But two, because as more was revealed about Ibiki, we learned that, oh, he was kind of a badass. See, Ibiki is not only a special Jonin, but he spent the majority of his life in the Anbu. And he gained such a reputation in the Anbu as an incredible interrogator that Kisame, when he was guarding people from his own cipher division from the Hidden Mist in order to get them back with village secrets, the second that he saw Ibiki, he just killed them because he knew if Ibiki got his hands on any of these members of the Cypher Corps that he would get whatever information he needed. That was real life fear from Kisame, who, mind you, also possibly could have just tried to fight off the Anbu, but he had so much respect for the Anbu and Ibiki specifically that he decided it would be easier to kill his own men. Not to mention in the anime, we learned how Ibiki actually got his scars. He was tortured by a man by the name of Aorokusho, who was trying to acquire the sword of the Thunder God, and Ibiki had some information on where it was. And so Ao tortured Ibiki for hours. However, Ibiki just sat there and took it, never breaking, and it's why he now lives with a massive amount of scars he has today. But this man's proclivity for torture and interrogation goes far beyond just his understanding of the human mind. It even drags its way into the ninjutsu that he controls. As we saw in the anime, as Ibiki was battling against the animal path, he used a couple of different types of summoning techniques, where he summoned things like an Iron Maiden and a torture chamber. But here's the thing about how Ibiki's summoning techniques work. Any pain that Ibiki inflicts onto people using the summoning techniques is actually reflected upon him as well. But because his pain tolerance is so unbelievably high, he can just throw people in an Iron Maiden and they'll squeal before he even really begins to sweat. That's badass. I just love him. He's probably a really bad guy. He's probably tortured a lot of people, but I just love him and I feel like he deserves more love. But enough about people who take people apart. Let's talk about people who put them back together, because coming in at number 8, we have Shizune. Shizune is the definition of sidelined needlessly. See, Shizune is actually Dan, Tsunade's original lover, and actually I guess only lover, unless you believe the fanfics that her and Jiraiya did, you know, a couple of times. Cousin. Wait, no. Niece. And therefore, after the loss of Dan, Tsunade took Shizune under her wing. Now, unfortunately, because Tsunade found another really good apprentice, I'll give you a hint, she was number 10 on this list, Shizune gets kind of sidelined, as Sakura kind of takes all of the shine as it pertains to being associated with Tsunade. However, I argue that this isn't fair at all, because Shizune is one of the most impressive medical ninjutsu users and overall combatants in all of Naruto. On top of this, she also served as an aide to Tsunade as the Hokage and to Kakashi and to Naruto. She has been aiding the office of the Hokage for like 2.5 decades. Maybe like 2 decades, closer to 2 decades. And honestly, Shizune kind of covered for Tsunade for a long time. See, Tsunade obviously taught Shizune pretty much everything that she knew about medical ninjutsu. And because of this, when anybody wanted Tsunade to do a surgery over her kind of drinking and gambling period, Shizune would actually be the one to do the surgery. We know this because when the 4th Raikage and Amai sought out Tsunade in order to help an injured comrade, Tsunade was like, yeah, I'll do the surgery, of course, and then just had Shizune do it. But the thing is that Tsunade could trust Shizune because she was the 2nd greatest medical ninjutsu user on Earth. But outside of being an incredible medical ninjutsu specialist who's able to regenerate lost cells, yeah, she can use the healing resuscitation rejuvenation technique. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the healing resuscitation regeneration technique, which allows her to change somebody's cellular makeup to turn those cells into the necessary cells to fix an injury. Now, a lot of medics are required to pull off this jutsu in the first place, but Shizune is one of the medics who can lead this jutsu. But outside of being an incredible medical ninjutsu specialist, she's also a rather dangerous combatant. Even Jiraiya believed that she would be enough to battle against Kabuto. We see her use Shadow Clone Jutsu and make 36 clones. She was also the person to lead the team that sealed the Three Tails after Yagura's death. But more than anything, Shizune focuses all of her attacks around poison, as she's able to emit poisonous gas from her mouth or use poison-covered needles that she can shoot into opponents. And mind you, the mouth poison she uses is fatal if you even inhale a little whiff. And mind you, without her, nobody would have figured out how Nagato's Black Rod receivers work, as she was the first person to figure it out. She was also the person who made the connection between the White Zetsu and Hagoromo's cells, which is why she was placed in charge of the logistical support and medical division in the 4th Great Shinobi World War. That's respect, but she doesn't get enough respect from you, which is why she's at number 8. But speaking of people who don't get enough respect, we have our number 7 spot, Yamato. Now, this is a man who's not only disrespected by people outside of the Naruto universe, but also inside the Naruto universe. See, the problem with Yamato is that unfortunately he came in to replace Kakashi, which are big boots to fill. And because of this, he's constantly compared to Kakashi, which is unfair to him because they're completely different people with different backstories, even though their backstories do overlap a lot. And on top of this, he's not nearly as hot as Kakashi, which also doesn't work in his favor. But Yamato's legit. He's a cool character with a cool backstory and cool, unique motivations. I mean, he was quite literally made in a lab by Orochimaru, the only child out of 70 to survive the human experimentation in the earliest stages of Orochimaru becoming a genuinely bad person. And after Orochimaru was driven out of the village, Yamato kind of stumbled out of his test tube and was like, I can control wood. And then he got scooped up by the other worst person in the village, Danzo, and was immediately funneled into the Anbu/root. And since he had wood released, Danzo got excited about him and basically raised him until eventually Yamato, with the codename Kinoe, became Danzo's perfect little child soldier who was sent to assassinate Hiruzen, where he was foiled by Kakashi, who began a long, arduous process of unbrainwashing Yamato until eventually he could pull him out of the root. And as we peel away the onion of this brainwashing on Yamato, we realize that he lives with an immense amount of guilt over all of the other test subjects who he couldn't save from Orochimaru. And once Kakashi was finally able to get Yamato out of the root, Kakashi and him served as Anbu members together. And as they spent more time with each other in the Anbu, they became really close friends. And even after Kakashi was pulled out of the Anbu to go become a Jonin sensei, Yamato stayed in the root and acquired the greatest service record out of any Anbu member under the third Hokage, meaning the most successful missions, the most people saved, the most people probably killed. He is one of, if not the most successful Anbu member ever. Not to mention, without him, Naruto probably would have destroyed the majority of Konoha and a lot of other places, and definitely wouldn't have got a mastery over Kurama. Yamato was able to do effectively what Jiraiya couldn't: tame Naruto, as after all, Yamato was able to suppress a four-tailed version 2 cloak from Naruto in seconds. And Yamato is believed to be so important in Naruto's growth that he actually put a seal on Hashirama's necklace that Naruto wears that would alert Yamato on his palm of how many tails that Naruto is currently manifesting, so Yamato could get to it. But on top of being able to suppress the chakra of Naruto, Yamato is able to suppress the chakra of everybody, as he was the person who suppressed Kisame's chakra to the point that Kisame had to elect to kill himself. So yeah, Yamato's legit. But is he as legit as our number 6 entry on this list? Because coming in at number 6, we have Shino. Listen, Shino being here is a bit weird because Shino does get a lot of respect, and therefore he could have been a lot lower on the list. However, if you subscribe to the same line of thought that I do, and you probably should, Shino should get way more love than he even currently is. See, we've all seen the meme that Shino has technically never lost the fight, and that if he went on the Sasuke retrieval arc, Sasuke would have come back, which is why Shino had to conveniently be away on a mission when the Sasuke retrieval arc was happening, because otherwise the plot wouldn't have moved forward. And genuinely, the meme is correct. Shino has never lost a battle until Boruto, when he battled against Mitsuki, but even Mitsuki knew that Shino had some bugs that would have killed Mitsuki that he just didn't use because he was a child and they were training. Like, we've all seen Shino have the battle IQ to put bugs in a dude's palm air hole so it blows out his elbows. It actually in the manga blows off one of his arms. We've all seen Shino have an incredibly interesting battle against another Aburame member that was reincarnated in the 4th Great Shinobi World War. You know, his battle against Tsurune, who, mind you, was a prodigy in the Aburame clan and was handpicked to be the right-hand man of Danzo. Was not only a trained root member, but also had access to the Rinkaichu, nano-sized bugs that are able to crawl across his skin, making it incredibly corrosive, and anybody he touched basically begins to melt away like that. And Shino was able to defeat that guy. Shino was intelligent enough to actually breed some of his bugs with Tsurune's nano-sized bugs so that he could repel the corrosive poison, as well as being able to use these bugs to pin Tsurune down long enough that he was able to be sealed, cementing Shino as the strongest member of the Aburame clan by far. And what's truly crazy is that Shino could be stronger. In fact, Shino is compatible with the Rinkaichu. He just chooses not to use it. But it doesn't mean that Shino doesn't have some insane bugs in his arsenal, like the Kidaichu that live within Shino's body like all all his other bugs, but have to be fed a certain amount of chakra. Otherwise, they begin to consume as much chakra as possible and grow to the size of boulders, which Shino can just flick into a person's body or a 10-tail clone body. And since they don't know how much chakra to feed the keyed-eyed shoe, they just explode from the inside. And here's the thing about Shino. The reason that he's actually pretty high up on this list when everybody knows that he's incredibly cool, even though the story does forget about him as a character, is because the acknowledgement that you give Shino isn't even close to the acknowledgement that I give Shino. See, I believe that Shino is actually now in Boruto more relevant than ever.
Why, Nick? Why is Shino now probably the most relevant and most important Jonin in all of Konoha?
Well, because as we've already established, Shino is the strongest of the Aburame clan. And that's important because in Boruto, we now exist in a universe where chakra-based attacks like ninjutsu and genjutsu are basically useless. The biggest and baddest threats in the Boruto universe are all Otsutsuki, who are not only immune to genjutsu, but can also absorb and fire back all ninjutsu. And that's bad, especially for people like Sasuke and Naruto, who are heavily reliant on ninjutsu. But you know who isn't heavily reliant on ninjutsu? Shino Aburame. You know what can't be absorbed? Real life things. And since the Aburame essentially replaced their own chakra network with bugs, the Aburame, and more specifically Shino Aburame, are actually the best people outside of straight taijutsu users to battle against the Otsutsuki. In fact, one could go so far as to say that the Aburame are a straight counter to the Otsutsuki. As for the usage of things like stealth and insect jamming technique, they can confuse the Byakugan of the Otsutsuki, while nestling their bugs into the skin of the Otsutsuki so they can either implode from the inside or get paralyzed and die, like what happened with Shisui, or just possibly corrode away if they get some Rinkaichu on them. The reason that Shino is high on this list is because I think that Shino is possibly an Otsutsuki buster, and he doesn't get near that amount of love. But since we're talking about people with weird bodies, let's keep talking about people with weird bodies, because coming up at number 5, we have Konan. Historically, the most disrespected member of the Akatsuki, bar none. Konan is a bit like the first lady of a president who lost their mind in office. So like Calvin Coolidge's wife, Ronald Reagan's wife. Without getting nearly the level of acknowledgement that they deserve, they pseudo run everything while the men around them fade into oblivion. See, Konan is usually relegated to being Nagato or Yahiko's love interest, the side character or the bodyguard of Nagato's true body. But she is so much more than that. Not only is Konan one of the founding members of the Akatsuki, she was also most definitely one of the most intelligent people in the Akatsuki. And not to mention, without Konan going on a walk one day and finding Nagato and saving his life, he wouldn't have made it. Which, like, once again, makes Madara's plan so baffling. Like, what if Nagato had died in the Hidden Rain? But after Yahiko's very publicly killed by Hanzo and Danzo, the new version of the Akatsuki created a civil war in the Hidden Rain, and they killed Hanzo. However, what's very often forgotten in all of this is that in order to make sure that the village didn't freak out, Konan actually assumes Hanzo's position. Like, she takes on his appearance and leads the village. Well, Nagato is absolutely the leader of the Akatsuki. Konan actually led the Hidden Rain, but this didn't stop her from being an incredibly important member of the Akatsuki. As in the anime, it was depicted that she was part of the team that recruited Hidan. In Storm 4, it's shown that she is the person who not only defeated Sasori, but brought him into the Akatsuki.
I know, it's not canon.
But in the absence of information, we gotta take the information we have. And in Storm 4, she defeated Sasori's third Kazekage puppet, the thing that could use iron sand. And she was able to do this because she had mastered wind, water, earth, and yang release while also being a sensor type ninja. And not to mention that she loved origami so much that she made a technique called Dance of the Shikigami, which made her body paper, which speaks to her intelligence because she just liked something and created a jutsu that gave her borderline physical immunity, as well as fly and turn her body into butterflies so she could travel long distances easily. On top of this, she was also able to control the density of the paper, making it incredibly hard so she could turn her body into shurikens or weapons. And this wasn't like a stolen hidden jutsu like with Deidara or Kakuzu. She made this jutsu. And even though she was made of paper, she still tanked a flame bullet from Jiraiya with next to no damage. And once again, to speak to her intelligence, it's like Batman level. Like, Konan was able to perfectly deduce what Obito's abilities were and how she could counter them, all by running countless simulations of how the battle might unfold. And without Kishimoto's greatest mistake, Izanagi, being introduced, she would have killed Obito. Like, Konan with prep time is stronger than Obito, but the plot necessitated that Obito stay around, so obviously reality warping got introduced through the means of Izanagi. And yet, she is the least talked about, least respected member of the Akatsuki by far. The leader of the Hidden Reign while the Akatsuki were operating and after Nagato's death, and basically fought Obito to a standstill that he should have lost. How does that not merit respect? But unfortunately, a lot of people on this list aren't going to merit as much respect as they deserve, and that is definitely the case for our number 4 spot on this list, Kankuro. Kankuro, from the moment he was introduced to the story, fastly became one of my favorite characters. Kankuro, outside of being incredibly loyal to his 2 siblings, Tamari and Gaara, is also probably the greatest puppet user alive. No, scratch that. Is the greatest puppet user alive. And while obviously Kankuro, while Granichio and Sasori were alive, was definitely not the greatest puppet user alive, I'd argue that has more to do with the fact that Kankuro was only like 15 or 16 when they were both alive. I would say that a peak form Kankuro probably would stand a relatively good chance against either of them. And this is because Kankuro's always been impressive. See, the earliest battle we ever saw from Kankuro was when he fought against one of Orochimaru's plants in the Chunin exams, Tsurugi. And Tsurugi, just like the rest of Orochimaru's plants, was far beyond Genin level. And yet Kankuro was able to turn Tsurugi's close quarter combat style against him and win the battle pretty handedly. Not to mention that Kankuro was also able to battle against Shino in Naruto and tie with him, which battling against Shino in OG Naruto and tying is a feat. But only a little while after that, Kankuro was able to battle against a level 2 curse mark Sakon and Ukon, who were the leaders of the Sound Village 4, mind you, and kill them. Sure, you could say Kiba was there, but what did Kiba do? And maybe more impressively than anything, in the 4th Great Shinobi World War, Kankuro was able to battle against the reincarnations of Sasori and Deidara simultaneously and seal them both, obviously with the help of Sai, but still. This is even more impressive when you consider the fact that a lot of Kankuro's kit is built around using poison, and Edo Tensei bodies aren't affected by poison. In fact, in the 4th Great Shinobi World War, Kankuro said to Sasori that his black secret technique has actually surpassed Sasori's red secret technique, and the 2 secret techniques are the techniques that a puppet user uses to control their puppets. And honestly, by the time that Boruto comes around, Kankuro might be right about that. See, what a lot of people don't know about Kankuro, because it's in one of the weirder pieces of Naruto lore, is that Kankuro has achieved something that no other puppet master has ever achieved. See, in the novelization of Naruto the Last, the movie where Naruto and Hinata finally smooch, there's a lot more information than the movie actually provides. So we see in the movie that the Otsutsuki are able to control puppets autonomously. And in the novelization of this movie, Kankuro actually gets to study these puppets and tries to figure out how the Otsutsuki are able to puppet these puppets without chakra strings or anything, which gives Kankuro the idea of creating chakra threads that are so thin they're imperceptible, which makes the puppets that he's controlling appear to be autonomously controlled. And because he's made the threads substantially thinner, they can now be substantially longer, meaning that Kankuro can be way further from the battlefield than he could have been prior, controlling a puppet that seems to be moving on its own, guaranteeing Kankuro's safety and pretty much perfecting the puppet technique as it was created to protect those who were using it. As the Hidden Sand created the puppet technique so their shinobi wouldn't die on the battlefield, which makes Kankuro probably the greatest puppet user of all time. Now that he has things like Sasori's 3rd Kazekage puppet and Sasori's actual body, his arsenal is nothing to scoff at. And yet Kankuro is usually referred to as the 3rd greatest puppet user of all time, being below both Sasori and Granichio, which I think is disrespectful, which is why he's number 4 on this list. But some people on this list do deserve a certain level of disrespect, and there's no entry on this list, or maybe no character in Naruto more deserving of that disrespect than our number 3 entry, Danzo.
Nick, what do you mean Danzo's underrated?
Well, I will admit this is a bit of a unique spot. I mean, Danzo is an incredibly important character. Basically, everything that's ever happened in Naruto is because Danzo did something. He is unequivocally one of the most, if not the most, evil person in Naruto's universe. A man with so much vitriol in his heart that he leaked the information about Naruto being the Jinchuriki of Kurama so the entire village would come together in their hatred for a baby. That's a bad dude. But the reason that Danzo's on this list isn't because I believe he doesn't get enough credit as a fighter or anything like that. It's because he doesn't get enough credit as a villain. See, when you ask somebody who's your favorite villain from Naruto, most of them will say Nagato or Madara or maybe even Obito if they're weird. Some of the OG Naruto fans will even go so far back as to say it's Zabuza, which is cultured. But very few, and I mean very few people, will look you dead in the eye in, say, Danzo. Now, is that maybe because Danzo isn't likable like any of the other characters? Maybe, but since when did villains need to be likable? Danzo is the true manifestation of evil, and more than that, the true manifestation of how those who are the evilest usually believe they're in the right. This is a man who day after day made the wrong decision for the entirety of humanity, and every single time believed he was crushing it. A man who made Naruto's life a living hell. A man who made it a passion of his to abduct talented children and put them into a murder ring called the Root. A man who orchestrated the Uchiha massacre. A man who created the Akatsuki. A man who condoned and worked with Orochimaru as he killed 70 children trying to recreate wood release. He is the face of how evil usually believes it's just. And that is... he is the most real-life grounded villain out of any of the villains in Naruto. He is the senator who believes putting kids in cages at the border is the right thing to do because their parents tried to sneak into a country to get a better life. He is the CEO who believes that his $3 million yearly revenue shouldn't be cut into because a couple of people at the bottom of his company want a livable wage. He is a union-busting film studio cutting the tops off of trees so everybody who's striking for fair wages gets to bake in LA heat. He is the actual true representation of malice in Naruto, and how those with malignant intentions can rise to places of power through the complacency of those who are supposed to check them. Looking at you, Hiruzen. He is by far and away Naruto's best villain. There's no redemption for Danzo. There's no Danzo apologists, and that's the way a villain should be. Enough with this broken hero thing. Sure, he thought he was doing what was best for the village, but everybody who read or watched Naruto knows that he wasn't. And that's perfect writing. Sure, you could be like,
Oh, he wanted to acquire as much strength as Hiruzen had because he was always living in Hiruzen's shadow.
but that's not true. We all know that's not true. He's evil. And sometimes the most important thing for a villain to be is evil. Just why Danzo, even though he gets talked about a lot, doesn't get the love he deserves. Well, maybe love is the wrong word, but I wish more people thought he was their favorite villain as well. But enough about the people whose names you know, because coming in at number 2, we have Aoba Yamashiro. You don't know who that is, do you? Yeah, kind of proves my point. Aoba is the epitome of success in silence. He, like Ibiki, is a special Jonin. And ironically, he's a special Jonin for reasons somewhat similar to that of Ibiki. The reason that Aoba is considered a special Jonin is because he has an ability to read other people's thoughts, much in the way that a Yamanaka clan member has the ability to dive into somebody's brain by making physical contact. Aoba has that ability. However, it's revealed that Aoba actually doesn't need to make physical contact with a person to dive into their brain, unlike the Yamanaka, who do need to make physical contact. Aoba simply needs to spend enough time in the vicinity of somebody and understand their general vibe before he can begin to delve into their brain. Yeah, if you just spend enough time around Aoba, he can read your mind. On top of this, Aoba also has access to a hidden jutsu, which are clan-specific or village-specific jutsus. And his hidden technique is secret technique Stone Needles, which allows Aoba to throw kunai with strings attached to them that once they lodge themselves in an enemy, Aoba can pump his chakra from the strings into the kunai and into the body of his opponent, at which point that opponent becomes paralyzed, like shadow paralysis jutsu. However, unlike shadow paralysis jutsu, after pumping that chakra into somebody's body, they are paralyzed, and the user can just drop the strings and go attack. Now, obviously, Aoba tried to use his technique against Kisame, who can absorb chakra, so it kind of backfired against him. But against anybody else, this is a lethal jutsu. On top of this, during the Konoha Crush arc, we saw Aoba use one of the strongest fire release ninjutsu in existence. We saw him use fire release Fire Dragon Bullet, which is actually usually only used by Sarutobi, who are known for their fire release. But if none of that was cool enough, Aoba also has an ability that allows him to summon just a ton of crows. He has a technique called Scattering 1,000 Crows technique, which has him manifesting 1,000 crows that he can control with hand motions to attack his enemies, which is not only good for scouting, but also good for offensive attacks, as getting swarmed by 1,000 crows is not only annoying, but dangerous. And it allows him to smother a person's field of view and their ability to track chakra, allowing other people to sweep in and attack. On top of this, his intellect is no joke. He was the person who identified Kabuto as a fake Anbu member and as the person who cast the genjutsu that put the entire Chunin exam arena to sleep. Not to mention that Aoba and Raido were able to run off Kakuzu and Hidan after they killed Asuma, meaning that Aoba has fought against the zombie duo and survived. And in the lead up to the 4th Great Shinobi Worlds War, Aoba interrogates Kisame, which forces Kisame to commit unlive. This man has been around for almost the entirety of Naruto's run, and yet you don't know his name. He's even there in Obito flashbacks. When Obito misses the entrance exam for the Shinobi Academy, Aoba is there all the way to the left. He is an integral part of basically everything that happens in Konoha, and you don't know who he is. But how could anybody in Naruto possibly have a bigger disparity in the amount of love that they get and the amount of love they deserve than a man who's been around for almost the entirety of Naruto with absolutely no name recognition whatsoever? And my bias might have a little bit to say about this, but I would say that the most underrated character in all of Naruto is very easily Sai. See, Sai is one of my favorite characters in Naruto, and he's actually why I say Konoha 13 and not Konoha 12. And I'm basically the only Naruto YouTuber who does that. Sai to me is one of the most compelling and interesting characters in all of Naruto. Sai was a child very similarly to Yamato, adopted into the root at an age of way too young. And thus Sai was trained to remove all of his emotions and basically all of his humanity so he could operate as a human weapon, which, by the way, is symbolized by the fact that his name is Sai, which is a weapon. Now, when we're first introduced to Sai, he's kind of a traitor. Sure, he's on Team 7 to replace Sasuke, but he's still reporting to Danzo, he's moving really sneaky, and in the early days of our introduction to Sai, nobody really liked him because he was a traitor, and he was working for Danzo, one of the most universally unlikable people in anime history. However, as we get to know Sai, we realize that his backstory is tragic. See, Sai was an orphan who was recruited into the root. And even though he was stripped of his humanity and his emotions, the one thing that tied him to the real world and the little bit of humanity left in his chest was his art. And it was Sai's art that actually caught the attention of Shin, an older member of the root, who Sai got really close to. However, unbeknownst to them, the final step in the root's training was to have the two of them kill each other. However, before they can have their death match, Shin dies of an illness and Sai suppresses the memory of Shin. However, even though Sai suppressed the memory of Shin, he created a picture book where both Sai and Shin would be depicted on opposite ends of the book, and in the center, they would be depicted holding hands. But as Sai suppressed the memory of Shin, he didn't understand why he had the picture book anymore. However, he could never bring it upon himself to discard the book. And the true beauty of Sai's character is watching him go from this weapon that was forged in the fires of Danzo in the root into a human. And it happens gradually. See, Sai begins as this stiff-lipped, emotionless tool that's used to kill thousands of people. And through the connections that he makes with people like Ino and Rock Lee and Naruto and Sakura and Kakashi, he begins to understand how important bonds are. But it takes him a while because he reads he'll get closer to people if he gives them nicknames, but gives Sakura the nickname of ugly, which he didn't understand would hurt her feelings because he doesn't understand human emotion. But as time progresses, we see Sai actually acquire human emotion. And as Sai stares upon the relationship that Naruto claims to have with Sasuke, he's reminded of his relationship with his brother Shin. And as he remembers Shin for the first time in a lifetime, he begins to give people genuine smiles. But the true manifestations of Sai's human emotions coming to the forefront is when he's battling against Sasori and Deidara. Sasori and Deidara are using the reincarnated body of his brother Shin as a living bomb. And this is the first time that we see Sai flush with actual human emotions, and those emotions are rage, which is immediately followed by sadness as we see Sai grow incredibly sad once his brother is released from this role of a living bomb and is let to go return to the Pure Land. Outside of Sai's journey from being an emotionless tool to a human being, Sai also has one of the most interesting kits in Naruto. Super Beast Imitation Scroll is sick. And also, without Sai's Tiger Seal, the majority of the people that were brought back in the 4th Great Shinobi World War couldn't have been sealed. He is instrumental to making sure some of the strongest ninjas in history get put back to where they came from. Not to mention, as a man who grew up in the root and was trained to be the perfect assassin, Sai's Kenjutsu, Taijutsu, and Ninjutsu is next level. Sai was able to easily defeat Kabuto, was able to block an attack from Sasuke launched at Naruto, and his Super Beast Imitation Scroll can be launched with one hand, which gives him an advantage over other ninjutsu users who have to use both. I love Sai as a character. He's in my top 5 in Naruto, and yet the Naruto fandom seems to largely forget about him, calling him Diet Sasuke. When in reality, I think it should be the other way around. I think Sasuke should be Diet Sai. But what makes me happy is that Sai is as beloved by Kishimoto as he is by me. Sai is one of the very few men from the Konoha 13 who didn't get a very stupid haircut in Boruto. On top of that, he got hooked up with Ino, who is now unequivocally the hottest woman in the Konoha 13 in Boruto. So whether or not you like him, the author of the story likes him. And that's good enough for me. But what do you guys think? Who's the most underrated character in Naruto, in your opinion? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell.
Personally, I think Shisui is an underrated character. I wish we saw more from him.